Hello and welcome to Who Wore It Better, where I review Raw and Smackdown back to back and try and figure out which show won for the week. Kind of a double whammy for programming this week, as not only is it go home week for Clash of Champions this Sunday, but also Raw and Smackdown come from Madison Square Garden for the first time in about forever, so let's see how both shows did. Stone Cold Steve Austin opens Monday Night Raw. He's wearing his favorite pair of sneakers, and he's here to moderate the do-over of the contract signing between Seth Rollins and Braun Strowman. Michael Cole on commentary says, all is right with the world again now that Austin's back on Raw. Well, gosh, tell us how you really feel. Not only that, it wasn't even that long ago that Austin was on Raw. He was on the Raw reunion, and then he was doing that Skype call not long afterwards. So it's not like we haven't been seeing Austin for a while here. Austin recalls some of his favorite Madison Square Garden memories: Survivor Series against Bret Hart, the stunner to Vince McMahon, SummerSlam 1998. What I liked about this part was he's telling his stories, and he's effectively killing off the what chance because he's not speaking in a cadence or a rhythm to allow for it. You know what? It's pretty damn refreshing. Seth and Braun are in the ring now, and Austin says, well, for some reason we can't get this contract signed. I'm like, it was signed last week until AJ Styles ripped it up. Anyway, Seth and Braun exchange some words. Seth calls himself the best wrestler in the world, which gets some boos from the MSG crowd, some CM Punk and AJ Styles chants in response to that. The two sign the contract, and all is done and finito. All of a sudden, the OC interrupt once again. AJ's cutting another heel promo, but he gets riled up by the fans who chant what at him, call him an asshole, and Austin repeats that to AJ, and AJ goes, well, maybe you're the asshole. Maybe you should shut up. Eventually, Seth and Braun start fighting the OC. AJ's able to avoid a Seth Rollins stomp, but walks right into a Stone Cold Stunner to a massive ovation, and that ends the segment there. Pretty entertaining way to open the show. I've said it before about the double-edged sword of nostalgia with this company, how I feel they keep bringing back these legends, and it stifles the progress of the current and future stars of the company, and they keep talking about the days of yore and how good the old days were and everything. They keep ignoring the present talent. That being said, you can't help but smile when Austin's in the ring and spinning his yarns about his stories and everything. And to see him drop the stunner on AJ Styles, who did a fantastic sell job, by the way, was kind of a fun way to end the segment. AJ is still selling the effect of that stunner from before the break as we go to our first match as he takes on Cedric Alexander, another one of my fantasy matchups for AJ Styles in the company. Go check out this countdown for more of those. Doesn't get very far though, because eventually the OC run in and beat up Cedric. The match is thrown out. All of a sudden the Viking Raiders appear and they help Cedric clean house. And so we're going to see how that morphs into the main event later on. So the question is, are the Viking Raiders face now all of a sudden? Because for a while they've been heel for the longest time, or at least they've been portrayed as heel, or at least delivered in such a way. However, I think maybe it's more of a carryover from a couple weeks ago in the Tag Team Turmoil match when you had those two teams fighting and both getting disqualified in that gauntlet thing. So maybe it's a continuation of that, and maybe after this the status quo will return to normal, or maybe this is a Viking Raiders face turn. Either way, it's exciting to see them fight a real team for once. We get a really sweet moment where Roman Reigns is on stage and he brings out some Connor's Cure kids in their respective outfits. It's a really cool moment. Then we go to our next match as Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair are unlikely tag team partners taking on Sasha Banks and Bayley. This match, in more ways than one, was a huge showcase, like a love letter to the Four Horsewomen, essentially, because not only are they all four in the ring, but also the commentary just gushes for a long, long time about the history of these four ladies from NXT all the way to the present day and all their relationships and their feuds and everything in between. You could tell they're reading from a very meticulously worded script here. And then all of a sudden, after several minutes of that, just nonstop talking and talking and talking, when they look up from their script and have to call the match, all of a sudden the commentary does this drastic change in pace, just constant noise, noise, noise. Then all of a sudden it's just like several breaks and just like dead air almost. It's almost like there's a huge departure from what they were doing. All of a sudden now they just have to call the match. They've run out of material to talk about, and they have to just call every once in a while to call a move. It's a really huge shift. But that aside, it's an awesome match that ends with Charlotte hitting the natural selection on Bayley to win and get some huge momentum going into their match at Clash of Champions. The one weird moment in this match for me was when Charlotte goes for a moonsault, but lands like on her feet instead of her knees. That looked really painful. I don't know if that was an intentional landing or what, but that was kind of a weird thing. But anyway, so cool to see these ladies featured in a segment that lasted about a half hour from beginning to end, getting all this time here, and they really delivered. I could definitely see this kind of like planting the seeds for maybe like a fatal four-way match or for, say, WrestleMania down the line next year. And if that's the case, based on what we saw here, I'm all for it. Backstage, the OC are hopping mad about what happened to them in the first hour. They're confronted by Robert Roode and Dolph Ziggler, aka Rudolph, and they say, hey, if you guys want to run the place, you should consider palling around with us. And then they shake on it and an alliance is formed. I'm really excited about this next matchup here as Rey Mysterio takes on Grand Metalik. Some enjoyable grappler events to be sure, but one quick thing I want to say here is quick shout out to the respective outfits they're wearing, because Rey's wearing some sweet ass Wolverine-inspired gear here, and Grand Metalik has clearly got a lot of Power Rangers inspiration from his outfit here. This is a really good match. There is one gnarly moment here when Rey takes a plancha from Grand Metalik and like his head gets knocked in a certain way, but the match ends with Rey hitting the frog splash to win the thing. This was a really good match. Now, was this the best lucha match of all time? No. Could it have been better? Probably, but I was happy with what we got. We get an announcement for our main event of the evening, a 10-man tag team match as Seth Rollins, Braun Strowman, Cedric Alexander, and the Viking Raiders take on Rudolph and the OC, and I really like how they built to this match, how we got to this point, not just from this evening on Monday, but also the previous 2 weeks and what the OC was getting into with the Viking Raiders and Cedric, respectively, to bring us to this moment here on Monday. I like the way they built this. The Street Profits appear to give us some match hype, and the live crowd is very much into these guys. Then we go to our King of the Ring semifinal triple threat match between Baron Corbin, Ricochet, and Samoa Joe. And you know what the biggest spot of this match was? The dueling "We want Corbin, Corbin sucks" chants. My God, folks, it's finally happening. Anyway, Ricochet hits Joe with a 630, kind of lands high on his head though, kind of short landing. But then Corbin beats Ricochet up, dumps him out, pins Samoa Joe, and wins the match and is going on to the finals of the tournament. And just the great stuff here. The match overall was really good. A rematch from last week as Lacey Evans takes on Natalya once again. This match was good, just not on the level of what we saw from the other ladies earlier in the night. Ultimately, Natalya makes Lacey tap out of the sharpshooter, gets her win back from last week. We see some footage from before the show went on the air as former New York Knicks and current Boston Celtics player Enes Kanter's being interviewed about his time having played in MSG. All of a sudden, R-Truth shows up to say, what's up, presumably, but Enes belts him in the face and pins him to become the new 24/7 champion, and then R-Truth pins him right away to get it back. So get ready for a lot more of these celebrity championship victories, like the guy from Fox Sports a couple weeks ago, Enes Kanter this week. I mean, the Hardcore Championship, the spiritual predecessor to the 24/7 title, never had this kind of involvement, but you bet your ass that they probably thought about it. We then get an all-new Firefly Funhouse, and the big theme is stranger danger, stranger danger. All the puppets are just chanting that phrase over and over again. Bray screams at them to stop talking, and then Bray fixes Abby's clock. It says 3:16 on it, and then he hits it with a hammer, and it says 11:19. So, ooh, mystery and intrigue abound. Bray cuts a promo on Steve Austin here, and it seems like they may be going in that direction of like Bray versus Austin, but you know, what does the number on the clock mean? Lots of theories online already as to what it means. A lot of people are saying, well, it means The Undertaker, because The Undertaker's first match as a character was on November 19th, 1990, but that was a Superstars taping. His canonical debut was 3 days later at that year's Survivor Series, and that's like what they all regard Undertaker's first appearance to be, not that Superstars taping. You know, it probably does have something to do with The Undertaker, but for right now, I'm just keeping kind of a wait-and-see mindset about it, but it was a very interesting Firefly Funhouse to be sure. Main event time, we get that 10-man tag team match I talked about earlier, and this is another great match, one of many on the night. After a couple of commercial breaks and lots of big sequences of moves between all 10 guys, ultimately it just ends up right down to where the story on the night first began. AJ Styles, Cedric Alexander. Cedric avoids the phenomenal forearm and hits the lumbar check. He pins AJ and wins the match, but we don't even get time to really process that. I don't think the bell even rings here, because as soon as that third hand comes down and the match officially ends, Austin's music plays. Like, okay, I guess we must be running short on time because Austin's got to come out and get his shit in. I thought that was kind of a weird thing, but at the end of the day, though, it's still cool to see Cedric Alexander beating AJ Styles in the main event of Raw at Madison Square Garden. How cool is that? Anyway, Stone Cold gets a whole bunch of beers out. Everyone has a big wet time splashing the beer around, and that's how the show fades to black. And speaking of legends, The Undertaker opens up Smackdown to a huge ovation. He gets on the microphone and talks about, you know, the titans and the legends that have walked through these halls in the past and ushering in a new era of new superstars, only for Sami Zayn to interrupt. And Zayn's awesome here. He puts over Taker in a big way at first. Then he says he should have been him opening Smackdown with all due respect. And I said, with all due respect. And he respectfully asks Undertaker to leave the ring. And Taker, he thinks about it for a second. He walks out. You think he's going to leave, but then he turns around and just just hits Zayn with a big old choke slam to end the segment. It was not quite as impactful or plot progressing as Stone Cold's stuff on Raw the night before, but it was still entertaining just to see Zayn, get his shtick in and try and ask Taker to leave. It's so funny to see that stuff. I saw some folks online get upset about this bit here, saying Sami got buried. I don't see it that way at all. I mean, personally, I think it's really awesome that Sami got to have this cool moment in the ring with The Undertaker in Madison Square Garden. Not everyone gets a chance to do stuff with Undertaker anymore, so it's kind of cool to see that kind of interaction there. And again, I think Sami's shtick, everyone wants to see him get beat up. That's kind of his character, so I think it played perfectly into that. My one thing, though, is it's kind of weird because the timing of it is that, Sami and Taker are in this opening segment. The next one is The Miz versus Andrade with Shinsuke Nakamura doing commentary, and Sami is Shinsuke's manager and mouthpiece. So why wouldn't he be there for that is my question. The timing of it, I thought, was a little weird. Anyway, the match between Miz and Andrade is pretty good. They do fuck up the finish, though, because you see, Andrade is supposed to fall back into something and Miz hits him with skull-crushing finale. I think it would have been so much sweeter if he actually pulled that spot off, because it was kind of sloppy there. But right after the match, though, Shinsuke jumps Miz, hits him with a Kinshasa. So it is good to see Miz getting some wins, lead up to the pay-per-view on Sunday. But at the same time, though, Shinsuke is looking strong here, getting his big licks in on The Miz. Also, I forgot to mention that in between the Taker segment and the Miz and Andrade match, we saw Shane McMahon backstage talking to Chad Gable. Turns out that Elias is injured legit, so he will not be able to compete against Chad in that King of the Ring semifinal match. So Shane says he's going to find a replacement, a suitable replacement for Elias on the night. And then after the Miz Andrade match, we see the follow-up to that where Shane tells Chad, "It's Shane McMahon, it's me, best in the world." Oh boy! Mandy Rose takes on Nikki Cross up next. Mandy calls Nikki ugly. Yawn. The fans don't react either way. They couldn't care less about this kind of promo. However, they do pop when Nikki storms the ring during her entrance and goes right away, just throwing hands at Mandy Rose here. Good back and forth in the match. Some interference by Sonya Deville backfires. Nikki wins the match. Please tell me they're not going to keep going this route of Mandy doing this whole thing. Oh, I'm so much prettier than Nikki. Nikki's ugly. It's just, compared to what they're doing with the other ladies on this program, like the Horsewomen, for example, it's a super cringe, in my opinion, and super dated. Backstage, Ember Moon confronts Bayley about her actions from last week, walloping Becky Lynch with the chair. Bayley says, "I'm the same person I've always been," and then Ember accuses Bayley of fighting to stay relevant, and that seemed to touch a nerve with Bayley. We get a squash match as Heavy Machinery destroys some local talent. Then we go back to Shane McMahon's office where Kevin Owens is there. He's been requested, and so Shane says, "I will consider lifting the $100,000 fine on you if you referee this King of the Ring match with me and Chad Gable, and you officiate it correctly." What will Kevin Owens do, I wonder? We get a recap of Rowan's rage, then Eric Rowan makes his way to the ring to some new music. He starts cutting a promo, and he says, look into these eyes. All you see is a brute, not someone who could be a mastermind or a manipulator. Don't get very far in the promo when Roman Reigns interrupts, and they has fight. Big old brawl that goes all over the ring and in the crowd area. At one point, Rowan grabs a plant in the audience as a fan and power bombs him into Roman Reigns, and the fight keeps going. They're on the ramp. Rowan's taking everybody down. At one point, Rowan grabs the crane camera on stage and hucks it at Roman, and they all go tumbling down. Rowan leaves. Roman gets up under his own power, and the crowd pops for that. I really enjoyed this brawl. It was a really fun, frenetic, just wild brawl they had here. Really put Rowan over as a killer, too. I like that as well. My one nitpick about this segment I wish they had changed was that they gave a little more time to Rowan here to try to explore and try to explain some more of his motivations and his actions and everything. I don't think we got enough of that in this promo here. Bayley takes on Ember Moon in non-title action. Charlotte Flair's on commentary. Last week I might have been a little too harsh about the motivations, the explanation that Bayley gave to her heel turn last week. The more I think about it, it seems, this is the delusional heel who thinks he or she is a babyface trope that we've seen in the past, but I'm really curious to see how Bayley handles this. You can see the body language in her entrance on Tuesday was very kind of exaggerated, like forced to a pantomiming with the pandering to the audience. Like, you want to see the Bayley buddies? Yeah, here's the Bayley buddies. Yeah, Bayley buddies, woo! She was very obvious about it. So I'm really curious to see where they can go with Bayley's character with this, because maybe over time she gets a little more deranged and obsessive, trying to justify her actions and really believing she's in the right. Anyway, the match ends when Bayley hits her finisher on Ember to win the match, and then we get a face-off with her and Charlotte. Bayley backs away. So a lot of intrigue between, what we saw from Monday and Tuesday. Some really interesting things seeing, it makes me wonder who's going to win these matches on Sunday. Kofi Kingston appears to relive his favorite Madison Square Garden memories, specifically the one where he drove Randy Orton through a table as part of a street fight a decade ago in that very same building. Orton interrupts, he's in the crowd, he's talking trash to Kofi. He says he's been a pretender since day one, whether it was his fake Jamaican accent and the dreadlocks or his phony power of positivity bullshit, which got a huge reaction from the crowd. Kofi goes into the crowd to confront Orton, but it's a trap and they have a big fight. Eventually they're on a table here, and like Kofi's on the table, but he pushes Orton away and the table just breaks preemptively just under the weight of Kofi. So you think the spot is fucked, but aha, they actually have a backup table for this very purpose. So they bring the backup table out, Orton goes on it, Kofi with the big old boom drop from the railing onto him, very reminiscent of that match from a decade ago. So Kofi stands tall. This is a really good segment here. It's good to see Kofi get a leg up this week, but my question was, where was the revival this week? Because haven't they been on Orton's side this whole time leading up to this point? Main event time is the King of the Ring semifinal match as Chad Gable takes on Shane McMahon with Kevin Owens as the guest referee. Shane puts the King of the Ring crown on the World Cup trophy on stage, which was a nice touch. Chad immediately hits Shane with a German suplex and a bridge. Kevin Owens the fast count, kind of payback to what happened a few weeks ago when Shane did the same thing to Kevin against Elias. But Shane gets on the microphone and says, no, it's 2 out of 3 falls. And so then all of a sudden, after the commercial break, Kevin's entire resolve changes, and now he's no longer going to do fast counts for Shane. He's doing the fast counts when Chad's getting pinned now, and slow counts, I should say, when Chad's pinning Shane. So finally, though, Chad blocks a low blow attempt and puts him in the ankle lock with the grapevine, and Shane taps out. Kevin does nothing, yet the bell rings anyway. So Chad wins the second fall and is officially going on to the finals next week to face Baron Corbin in the King of the Ring tournament. After the match, though, Shane attacks Kevin, gets on the microphone, says he's fired. He just repeatedly yells at him and hits him with a mic. You're fired, you're fired. We get an AEW chant from some people in the crowd as we fade to black. This ending bit was pretty horrendous. Like, in fairness, they did a pretty good job, trying to do what they could on such short notice with Elias being out. You probably would have seen something very similar to that in this segment here. But, so I give them credit for furthering the storyline, but I'm just tired. I'm tired of Shane McMahon and Kevin Owens in this endless fight. Like, it was cute the first time they did it a couple of years ago, and then when the roles were reversed, I was interested, but like by that point, I think we had a lot of Shane McMahon fatigue, and I think it's just like, I'm just tired. I'm tired of it all. It's like, I think that this ending in particular put a real big damper on the show. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, Raw or Smackdown. And this week, my choice is Raw. I think it was, from top to bottom, a much stronger show than Smackdown was this week, even though Smackdown had a lot of good moments as well. I think Raw did a really good job blending the nostalgia of Stone Cold with the current stars as well. I think they also did a really good job weaving a story, not just the overall story arc in that one episode leading to the 10-man tag main event, but also the things that happened in the weeks before that, which they didn't necessarily show a lot of highlights for leading into this thing. They didn't try to remind you too much about it. It just kind of happened naturally, organically, and it felt really good, like the payoff to the main event match itself. And then the match itself was done very well. The one thing I didn't like about Raw was the Natalya Lacey Evans match, and even then it's like it was a good match, but it was one we already saw the previous week, and 50-50 booking, nah. I think having legends like Austin and Undertaker appear on programming, we all know what this does. It runs the risk of them shooting themselves in the foot, because all it does is undermine the current crop of guys trying to get a foothold in our collective consciousness, when all they do is roll out these old legends to go, oh gosh, weren't things so much better when they were around? Like the language of all is right in the world again now that Austin is back on Raw. I mean, that particular line was just sickening to me. I think that the company has traditionally done very well for themselves when they say, as a culture and as a philosophy, fuck the past and just forge their own identities and try and do their own thing. It worked in the mid-'80s, it worked in the late 90s. I'm just saying, like, sometimes getting rid of the past can be a good thing for your product. As far as Smackdown, I think that it had a lot of, good moments as well. The Roman brawl was a lot of fun. The Kofi Orton brawl, much in the same way. The Miz Andrade was probably the best match of the whole night. But yeah, the whole thing with Shane and Kevin Owens really bogged it down for me. Just knowing that, we're going to get more of this, aren't we? We're nowhere near done with this storyline. Like, why can't we just end this? But, on the plus side, at least Chad Gable's going to the finals of King of the Ring. And speaking of King of the Ring, one plug I want to get out here. This Thursday's Classic Pay-Per-View review, since we have King of the Ring on the mind lately is going to be King of the Ring 95. So, yeah. But let me know what you thought about Raw and SmackDown this week in the comments section below, and be sure to vote which show you thought was better by going to the iCard in the corner of your screen. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.